Welcome to F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans. I'm your host as always, Terry, and I'm here to keep you up to date with all of the unbiased, hard-hitting Formula 1 news. So grab your favourite mug of coffee, sit down, strap in and get yourself comfortable to join in the conversation. Because this is F1 Coffee Corner. This is Full Beans, the must-have podcast for all Formula 1 fans. Welcome back to another episode of F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans the podcast. It's me, as always, Terry, and what have I got in store for you on this latest episode? Well, in the expresso news, we're going to be taking a look back at the headlines from the past 7 days from my TikTok account. Very much a shameless plug there if you haven't already followed and subscribed to that page. Then in the coffee chat, we're going to be taking a look back at the Spanish Grand Prix at the weekend and also developments and a bit of a chat into what the W14 did and what Red Bull did and what to look forward to coming forward in terms of teams development. And then in the takeaway, we're just going to take a look forward into what's coming up next in the world of Formula 1. So with all of that in mind, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button to be notified of the latest episodes as they drop. Really appreciate it. If you're listening on a device that enables you to, please give the podcast a like, because that helps with boosting up in the ratings, which is always good. And if you haven't already followed me on TikTok, please already do so, because that is where you will get the latest daily news as it happens, rather than waiting for it to be reported by somebody else, really. So, yeah, with all of those shameless plugs in place, let's get on with this week's episode. So, without further ado, let's sit down, strap in, and get some full beans on this episode. So, kicking off with the expresso news. Now, I'm going to do this slightly differently, so you're going to have to bear with me, because I'm going to refer back to the TikToks and the headlines in there over the past 7 days to make it a lot easier. And also, I just wanted to bring you a taster of what people who follow the page get on a daily basis, because not a lot of people out there who watch the podcast probably watch me on TikTok. I could be wrong, actually. It could be the other way around. But I just wanted to give you a taste of what actually happens on a daily basis. So every morning, I upload a video, normally of me drinking coffee. Doesn't sound very, appealing, I must admit. But there's no talking, just music and a bunch of headlines of the latest news. So you can get a snapshot every day of what's happening in the world of Formula 1. It's a quick go-to guide where if you don't want to search through endless newspaper sites, endless clickbait stories, you can just go straight to it and go, oh, that's what's going on. That's the whole point of it. So we're going to start off with what's been happening in this world in the expresso news. So we've got Christian Horner saying that he's thankful that Aston Martin pitted twice in Monaco, because it certainly helped him, obviously making the wrong tyre selection on Fernando Alonso's car last time out in Monaco. We've got Fernando Alonso was saying how he's surprised that there's questions regarding the tyre selection and that Aston Martin got it wrong. Not sure I agree with you on that one, Fernando. We've got Lewis saying that he felt improvements in the new W14 going into the Spanish Grand Prix gives him hope for development. We've got Toto saying that the Lewis to Ferrari story is completely fabricated. We've got Alfa Romeo being linked to Haas in a new £20 million deal. I'm sure I mentioned that in the last podcast. We've got Fernando Alonso refusing to rule himself out of the title race. We've got Helmut Marko saying that Perez, he was scruffy during Monaco and that qualifying had already cost him the race over Monaco. We've got Martin Brundle saying that he'd like to see Lewis at Ferrari on the back of Toto saying it was rubbish. We've got Toto saying that he doesn't want Red Bull to be pinned back by the FIA, as that's going to destroy the sport. We've got Aston Martin moving into their new Silverstone headquarters. We've got Fred Vasseur saying that Ferrari are going to bring upgrades to the Spanish Grand Prix, which we've already seen. We've got Christian Horner paying tribute to new McLaren signing Rob Marshall after he moved across to McLaren from Red Bull after, I think it's 17 years with Red Bull. We got Seb invested in the German national sailing team. We've got Leclerc saying that the new track layout is going to leave his front left tyres crying. Little do we know, it certainly did. And also him. We got Lewis confirming that he's doing a documentary with Apple. We got DHL announcing they're using biofuel trucks for the European part of the calendar. We've got Helmut Marko saying that Red Bull are facing their top staff leaving due to them being offered double by other teams and how they're doing it in the cost cap. We've got Sky announcing that during the Hungarian Grand Prix for UK and Germany subscribers, there will be a Sky children's feed with children doing the commentary. We got Max saying that he thinks the rules should remain untouched and that will allow rivals to catch up on Red Bull. We've got, Hamlet Marco saying that he's surprised time and time again by Max's talent. We got the FIA clarifying wording on their penalties using the phrase "the next race that that the competitor participates in." That's on the back of what happened in the MotoGP, where the rider was given a penalty to serve at the next race, didn't ride in the next race, argued very successfully that the wording was wrong. So that's why you're seeing on all these new FIA rulings coming out from the Spanish Grand Prix onwards that it's saying at the next participatory Grand Prix for that competitor. That's what that one is. We've got Fernando saying that they're going to be competitive as they bring upgrades to Canada and Silverstone after the Spanish Grand Prix. We've got the FIA have now closed submissions for new teams and are going to review the submissions that they've had. Nelson Piquet losing his appeal against a racist slur that he made against Lewis Hamilton and being ordered to finally pay the fine. Helmut Marko saying that Mercedes have made a step forward after the double podium in Spain. Spoiler for what's coming up next. Fred Vasseur saying that he doesn't actually know how they're going to fix the F23 at the moment, which is concerning. And Lando obviously talked about his opening that collision was a misjudgment on his part, which we're going to go into in a second. So that is your whistle stop expresso news from the world of Formula One, brought to you by F1 Coffee Corner TikTok page. There we go. Right, with that in mind and with that in the bag, that's what, 5 minutes of expresso news. Pretty damn quick, if I say so myself. We are going to go on to the coffee chat, which takes us, we're going to coffee. Ready? And this week, we're going to be looking at, like I said, we're going to go back to the Spanish Grand Prix at the weekend. And the joy of recording this podcast quite soon after the Grand Prix is fresh in my mind. If you haven't already, please touch it with Fans Talk F1 podcast that I do with F1 Matt. That gives you a complete race debrief on the day it happens, film live on TikTok. Really good to do that. It's really good to get that interaction going. I really enjoy filming that one. That's done after each race on there, so that episode should be dropping later on this week. But let's get back to this episode, this podcast, and Spain. So what did we learn from Spain? We learned that despite upgrades, that Red Bull is just dominant. It's a dominant car. It won by, 24 seconds in the end. So I want to start off talking a bit about Max. Now, we know that he gets a percentage of disrespect from a group of Mercedes fans. I'm going to say group because there are quite a lot of fans actually who do like Max and what he brings to the sport and can perfectly see his achievements and what he's doing in Formula One. And I want to say that it's not all British fans neither who, we get tarnished as a country of people who don't like Max Verstappen. And I think if you're a true Formula One fan, I think that's completely wise of the mark. I think we all appreciate how damn good Max Verstappen is. He is going to be a Formula One great. And what I want to touch on is that comment exactly. At what point does Max Verstappen make a move from potential to great? He's a double world champion. He's a multiple race winner. He's on 40 wins now, one behind Senna, if I remember rightly. Multiple podiums, 2 world championships. Now, Fernando's got 2 world championships and is certain to go down as a great in Formula One. Yet Max has got the same already at the age of 24. I'm sure someone's going to correct me. Early 20s. I'm sure he's 24 if my memory's with me on that one. But if I am wrong, I apologise, Max fans. But what we've got a driver who is at the top of his game. And is he showing greatness? Is actually now the time when we go, Max Verstappen is now heading into those great Formula One, posse of goats. And Formula One goats is generational, always has been. And there will always been somebody who comes in with a natural born talent who takes over the sport, and Max is that person. Yes, he needs a car. Yes, he needs a team. Yes, all of those things make up a great driver. But the great drivers are the ones that can take it that extra, that what Max does. And I think it's time that Max has to start being regarded as a great in Formula One. We've now got to move from that transition of saying, yeah, he could break the records. Yeah, he's got great potential. Yeah, I'm just as guilty as everyone with that one. We are witnessing the start of the Max Verstappen era. Well, we're not witnessing it. We're smack banging it now. And he is driving so good. I don't even think in the equal machinery that you could catch him at the moment, he is at ease in that car. Yes, I know he's driving within the confines. Yes, I know he's got this massive advantage. Everyone's going to throw all these things at you. But ultimately, you've got to put the car there. Checo's got the same car. Can't put it there. Max puts it there. He controls it. He never looks under pressure. And he just does these things which just reminds me of a young Fernando in some respects, probably a young, hungry Lewis Hamilton. And one of the comments that came over the weekend was exactly that. How do you compare the two? Because Prime Lewis was just sensational, but Prime Max, like we're seeing now, is in that bracket. He is a great Formula One. If he walked away now, he would go down as a great in Formula One. And I think that's where we now got to make the move from potential to great. So, yeah, here it is. I'm saying that Max Verstappen needs to now be elevated into that category of great Formula One drivers. Numerous records still to break. If he stays in Formula One, I think they're all going to go by the wayside. But getting back to the race, let's have a look. So what we've got Max Verstappen P1. We've got the Mercedes boys in P2 and P3. Now Mercedes is going to be happy with Hamilton and Russell up there. We know that George took the escape route. The escape route made him 4-5 places. Big debate over whether or not he should have been penalised. Ultimately, the rules say that he can take that escape route. In fact, the rules insist he had to take that escape route. What the rules don't say is you have to give the places back when you take that escape route. I'm sure that loophole's going to be closed very rapidly by the FIA. I'm sure that they're going to turn around and say, you can't do this anymore, and it stays in there. So I think Mercedes will be delighted with that. They were the best of the rest by far. They weren't in contention for the win, but they were 0.3, 0.4 seconds off Max's average pace. Max's average pace, we know, was because he was conserving tyres, he was driving within limits, keeping off the white lines because he'd been penalised. So in terms of data, we don't actually know how close Mercedes is, but it is evident that this W14B package has taken a step in the right direction. It's a leap for Mercedes. They've got the bench zone. If you look at that W14, you'll see that for the first time ever, it was as low to the floor as it can be, the lowest it's ever been in terms of the ride height. It was right down there. It was there. They've never been able to get the W13 or 14 that low to the ground. So that is what they've been aiming to do, because that allows them now to get rid of the dragginess that it's still got. It's still a draggy car, and that's where their next step of development is clearly going to be, because now they can lower the ride height. Now they can work on the drag. That's what gives them the speed going forward. But Mercedes will be delighted with the showing of the W14 in Spain. They're staying on for a couple of days. They're doing a Pirelli tyre test. So today's Tuesday. There you've got George Russell today and Mick Schumacher for the first time in a Mercedes car tomorrow. Mick Schumacher done some great work at the factory in the sim apparently over the weekend. Driving until 2 a.m. is what Mercedes is telling us, getting the setup right after a troubling free practice. So don't underestimate the data and the work of these sim drivers. So we know that Danny's doing some work for Red Bull as well. And these guys are doing some great sim work. I know that Danny isn't the only one doing Red Bull sim work, far from it. But Mick is clearly doing the Mercedes sim work and doing some sterling job at it. And, it's a part of the team now that, in the absence of testing, is really crucial, to be honest, to get that data, to convert it, to put it in simulator. And this is what Mercedes wanted from the W14. They wanted this bench line so that when they put the data in the simulator, it's accurate, it's right. And they haven't had that up until now. So, really great drive for them. Really deserved podium. Didn't look like anyone else was troubling them. And then we've got Checo, who came all the way from, I think it was 11th or 12th. Really strong performance from Checo. He needed it, to be honest. Disappointing qualifying for the second Grand Prix in a row. But you can't fault his performance coming back through. Yes, he didn't have the pace to catch Russell, which is interesting. Is that a sign of the Red Bull in traffic isn't as good as the Red Bull at the front of a Grand Prix? Time to be seen. But really solid drive from Checo. Really good drive to get back to P4 in the end. Finished 35 seconds back from Max. But he didn't really look like chasing Russell down, did he, at one point? I think it was like 5-6 seconds going into the last 7-8 laps, but he couldn't close that gap anymore. Then we've got Carlos Sainz in 5th place. Now, Carlos is top Ferrari driver at the moment. Charles Leclerc would come on to, but he'd be disappointed with that. The Ferrari upgrades just didn't work. They seem to have a massive problem stemming from the floor directive that came in last year. So we know that the technical directive that changed the floor was introduced for flexi floor. We know that Red Bull were accused of flexi floor, but actually it was Ferrari. Ferrari changed their floor. Ever since then, they haven't been able to get the car right. They were looking dominant up until that point, and questions got to be asked. Was that a clever move by Red Bull, allowing that to happen so that actually their biggest competitor, which was Ferrari at the time, suffered? You've got to wonder. Politics and Formula One, they're always there, aren't they? But they haven't been able to get that floor. Ever since that floor problem, their tyre deg is terrible. That's what's causing problems. They can't get their strategy right because their car keeps performing differently. So even if you put hards on one stint and then the third stint, they're performing differently with different fuel loads, different way of handling, and it's causing the drivers a lot of stress and causing the strategy team, which I know Ferrari's strategy team are getting a lot of, I'm not going to say abuse, questions, a lot of questions asked, but ultimately their issue is that because their car is reacting in an unpredictable way, like Mercedes was last year, you can't get on control of strategy, and that puts you out of contention. But he picked up some points in his home Grand Prix, top performing Spanish driver. I'm sure he would have wanted more. However, in light of where Ferrari are, I think fifth is probably, above the Aston Martins. This is a good performance from Ferrari from the Spanish Grand Prix this weekend. Then we've got the Aston Martin team of Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso. Now, Lance beating Fernando for the first time this season in a race. I say that loosely because Fernando Alonso was kidnapped and has been replaced by somebody who's quite happy to not challenge his teammate. And for those of you who watch the race, will know that Fernando came up behind Lance at a rate of knots and suddenly came over the radio and was like, "Don't you worry, Lance, you just chill your beans right there. I'm just going to sit on your gearbox and protect you. We're going to take the 14 points for the team and mosey on home. I'm going to wave to the crowd on my way around, and here I go." So, Aston Martin, they'd be disappointed with 6th and 7th. Never got it right all week. Their upgrade that they brought didn't really help them. It seemed to take a step back. Now, this is the question that we've got going into Canada, which I'll touch on in a bit, is have Mercedes made a giant leap over Aston Martin, or did Aston Martin take a leap back with their development package that they brought to Barcelona, which just didn't work for them? We know Fernando had floor damage during qualifying, but even with a repaired floor during the race, he couldn't make places back. He was struggling. They were sitting duck on the straights. And this is what Mike Kratt warned at the beginning of the season when he said that you've got to gain the points while you can, because Alpine is starting to hunt him down. Mercedes is taking a leap over him. They've lost second place in the Constructors' Championship. They're now down to third place straight away. This is what Mike Kratt was on about capitalising on results, getting points in the bag while your car is competitive, because everybody else will close that gap. And are we now starting to see that from Aston Martin? Is that bubble bursting, or is it just a blip where it's just a one-off? Who knows? It remains to be seen. Then we've got Esteban Ocon in 8th place. Solid drive from Alpine. They actually look quick over the weekend, but they seem to be suffering from tyre deg. They, P8 and P10, we might as well do both together. Gasly he just picked up 2 penalties, didn't he? Blatant penalties for impeding during qualifying, both slam dunk penalties. But Gasly himself will be disappointed to attempt. The car had more. Ocon in 8th place. I'd say, though, that's where Alpine is, if I'm honest. Excuse me a sec. I'd say that's where Alpine is, though, in respective to where their car's performing. So, actually, I think that's a pretty good weekend out for Alpine. Both drivers in the points. They're where they need to be. The car is showing an improvement. The car is showing now an improvement to, this is probably the Alpine we expected at the beginning of the season that we didn't have. So the fact we've now got it part way through the season is good. They've got more upgrades to come. The driver pairing, I feel, still feels a bit staged. So I feel there's a bit of tension underlying there. I think as the season gets on, if there's any collisions, it could go Pete Tong for those two. But at the moment, it's all good in the Alpine camp. Otmar will be happy. And then we've got Joe in 9th place in between the 2 Alpines that we just talked about. Joe, great performance from him. He's performing really well this season. We've talked about him and Bottas. Bottas is looking like a driver who he's kind of lost his edge. Now, I touched on this on the podcast with Matt. Has he lost his edge because he's got that security of a multi-year contract? Now, Mercedes had this habit of giving him a 1-year contract, a rolling 1-year contract, and saying to him, "Here you go, 1 year, prove yourself, and you get another one." Whereas Alfa Romeo came out and went, "Valtteri, we really like you. Here's the 3-4 year deal," or whatever it was at the time. Has he become complacent? Joe's hungry. His place is up for grabs. We know that Audi want to make changes. And he's showing that. He's showing some great driving. He showed glimpses of it last year, let's be honest. So it's not a big surprise to Formula 1 fans to see Joe Anyu, performing where he is. But 9th place, great performance, solid performance from him. Some great moves in there. 2 points in the bag. Well done. And then just finishing off, let's just take a look at some of the others. Charles Leclerc, 11th place. Bad weekend for him. Car looked terrible. I think they made a mistake. I think Ferrari made a big mistake with the setup of the car in FP1. They tried that gamble where they set up both Carlos's and Charles's car on different setups to compare the new and the old. I think they dropped a clang there. I think, you're going to have to excuse my French, but I think they completely fucked up there because that was too much to change on Charles's car. And it's no surprise that on Charles's car, that was the one that had problems, and that was the one they had to do the major setup change on. So, lesson learned there, Ferrari. Don't piss about with your setups during a race weekend. I get that you want to test old and new, but that wasn't the best place for it. Let's just touch on Nick De Vries, Yuki Tsunoda. So Nick De Vries, solid race in 14th. The car looks better. Had some great upgrades to it. Lots of change on the AlphaTauri, almost as much, if not more, than the Mercedes. It's a brand new car to drive. Good to see Nick getting towards the points. Yuki will be disappointed with 12th place. I don't think he deserved the penalty, if I'm honest. The escape road's there for that reason. He didn't really force him off the track. He had full lock on. I think Yuki was really hard done by on that penalty. I spoke about it with Matt. He disagreed with me, but I think there was more incidents in that race where they would have picked up a penalty compared to the one Yuki did. Piastri in 13. Lando was way down the bottom. He's not even on the page because he was that bad. Lando fell off like an ice cream in the Spanish sun, like that dodgy cone you get when it gets too hot and just drips off and ends up on the pavement. That was Lando. Lap 1, smack, contact, off he goes to the back of the sun, back of the grid, mate. Terrible performance from them, race pace. They showed so much in qualifying, but that McLaren just died a death during the race. It was never going to trouble the points, never near it. And we're hearing of a B-spec McLaren for Silverstone, and they need it, to be honest. They're struggling with something on the setup of that car, and I know both drivers can't wait to get their hands on a better upgraded car. And we might as well touch on Haas and Williams while we're here. So Haas were disappointed down the bottom, qualified well, but they've got no race pace at all. Their car just disappeared, same as the Ferraris. No surprise there, they share a lot of parts with the Ferraris, but they just can't get their setup right. They seem to get it for qualifying, but come race day, disappear completely. And Williams look like a team who have got focus on next year already. It wasn't a track that's going to suit them. They knew they were in for a long weekend. Canada should suit them a little better. I'm intrigued to see how Canada goes for Williams. But they're at the back end of the careers. I think James Vowles is focusing on next year. Their floor, if you saw the picture, their floor compared to the other teams was just completely shocking. But yeah, that is your quick Spanish roundup of the Spanish Grand Prix. Now, developments. I want to touch a bit on developments and development upgrades because we've seen quite a few now. We've seen quite a few of the teams bring them. And it got the question thinking is, do you feel that what's hindering development of the teams at the moment? So I've heard this muted about quite a bit. So we've got the cost cap. So we all know that the cost cap hinders development in terms of how fast you can bring a car to the track and how much you can spend on it. We know that Mercedes have openly admitted they would have brought this car, shut the gap on Red Bull a lot quicker if they had, no budget to contend with. Then the other thing I saw, which was really interesting, I don't think it's been touched up on, is the engine freeze playing more of a part than what we thought on development. So we had the regulation change, and this is my free topic. So do we think that the gap between Red Bull and the rest of the teams is due to the regulation change, the cost cap, or the engine freeze, or a combination of all three? And I think it's a combination of all three potentially. However, the one thing that I feel is completely being overlooked is the engine freeze. Now, traditionally, we know that when it comes to cars being built, Red Bull aerodynamically have built a better car than Mercedes. Fair to say that Adrian Newey's aero package was a lot stronger than Mercedes' aero package, even during the dominant Mercedes times, because they had the hybrid engine and they could tap into that extra power, that extra horsepower to get them out of jail when it comes to the problems that they had in the aero package. Now we haven't got that because that engine freeze has allowed it to close up. It's allowed Honda to get right on the back of Mercedes. The actual engine output's pretty much the same now. They've developed it. It's reliable. Are we now seeing the actual clinks in the armour of the teams? Is this what the actual issue is? Is it because we haven't got that engine power that likes Mercedes and Red Bull are struggling? And this gap would have always been there, if you get my drift, if the engines had been similar. We know that Red Bull suffered with Renault engines. We know that when Honda first came on board, they struggled with it. Yet we know that Mercedes hybrid engine has been an absolute powertrain, if you choose the pun, from the off. So I feel that this is what's getting overlooked. Now, I do feel it's a combination. Like I touched on earlier, cost cap would allow teams to get back quicker, would allow teams to make up the gap a lot easier, spend what they want on it, go and recruit top people. Also, the regulation change. New regulations always do this. There's always a team that get it right, and the rest of the team has to play catch up. So it could well be a combination of all. But I just wanted to chuck into the mix during the coffee chat on the engine freeze, and I don't think the importance of the engine freeze is being highlighted enough in Formula One at the moment. Yeah, it was done by Honda pulling out. We obviously know they come back with Aston Martin, different story whatsoever. But that freeze stopped that Mercedes powertrain dead in its track. And I think we're now seeing the true scales of the teams in the sense of, was the dominant factor in the Mercedes the engine? Now, that's not take away the aero package, because they would have had to have a damn good aero package to get up there. But they didn't need a spectacular aero package. Whereas you could argue that Red Bull needed a spectacular aero package to get close to Mercedes, if that makes sense. Especially during those early Honda days when Max was picking up wins. So, yeah, really intrigued to get people's thoughts on that one. Really intrigued to see what your views are. In terms of what we got coming up, so if we take the takeaway, sip of coffee there. Let's have a look at the takeaway and what's coming up. So, next up, we've got Canada. We know that Aston Martin are bringing upgrades to Canada. There's talk that Mercedes are going to bring some upgrades more Silverstone based. I think they want to see how W14 runs at Canada. It's traditionally not the best track for them, and certainly not the best track for a draggy W14. So, be interesting to see what that brings. The other teams are still a bit coy. We're still a bit far out on understanding what the teams are going to bring. However, I feel we're going to be looking at the same again. I think Red Bull will be dominating. I think Mercedes and Aston will be trading the places for the rest of it. I expect Alpine to give a strong performance. Now, Aston Martin is saying their next upgrade is due in Montreal, in Canada. They're also saying they've got another one planned for Silverstone as well. So the upgrade package we saw in Barcelona wasn't everything they've got in their locker. So I'm really intrigued to see that one going. And like I say, I'm really intrigued to see that comparison between Aston Martin and Mercedes to see who has closed the gap the most to Red Bull. And if, in fact, Mercedes have made this giant leap, or whether or not it was just one of those bad weekends for Aston Martin. But in terms of that, in terms of what's coming up, the only other bit of news that I've got really that's quite interesting today is Bridgestone have made a bid to be the sole supplier for Formula One from 2025. So the Pirelli tyre contract is up in 2024, I believe. And then from 2025, it might be 26, the new contract kicks in. There was talk that it was going to go pretty much straight to Pirelli because it was a done deal. However, Bridgestone have kind of thrown a spanner in the works, and they're bringing a package, a submission to the FIA to be the sole supplier. Personally, I'd want to see a tyre war back. I'd like to see actually, the FIA saying, you know what, come in alongside Pirelli and let's develop them both and have teams on different tyres again. That's quite exciting. But it is only a sole supplier bid, so it looks like it's going to be them or us, which is a real disappointing one. And I'm pretty sure that's it for this week's podcast. It's been an interesting week in Formula One. It's been great to see the developments on track. It's been really good from a Mercedes development point of view to see all of those upgrades in work. It's been a weekend of domination from Red Bull once again, and I think we need to just appreciate that this Red Bull could win every single race, and that's not an exaggeration. They could win everything, which is quite a scary thought when you think about it. And is this the week when we finally realise and we finally acknowledge that Max Verstappen deserves to join the greats of Formula One? If he wins in Montreal, which we all expect, he gets tied with Ayrton Senna. Now, I know Senna's life was cut tragically short, but he's got to start being in that great category. He's a double world champion. We've got to start respecting what this guy brings to the Formula One. Now, I'm not saying that everyone else is washed up. I'm not saying that Lewis is never going to get his 8th world title. I just think that we need to understand that we're in a world now of Max Verstappen finally being recognised as a great. None of Grand Slams in the fastest lap, led from start to finish, top maximum points. So, let me know what you think about this one. Like I said, that's all I've got for you this week. It's a short one. I'm not going to apologise for it being a short one. I'm sure you appreciate it. Welcome to F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans. I'm your host as always, Terry, and I'm here to keep you up to date with all of the unbiased, hard-hitting Formula One news.